Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our Trade and Development webinar series. This is the 6th episode of this series. So I'd like to first introduce myself. My name is Lanre Peter Elufison. I'm the Executive Director of Ominira Initiative for Economic Advancement. We are a think tank based here in the city of Ibadan. Our mission is to research and advance solutions to socioeconomic issues, Africa's socioeconomic issues, obviously beginning from Nigeria. So I welcome you all to this month's episode of Trade and Development webinar series. The Trade and Development webinar series is intended to deepen public understanding of the issues around free trade and development on the continent. So permit me, we'll have 3 speakers today. Let me introduce each of them. It's Teniola Tayo. This is the second time we're having Teniola, and Teniola, I appreciate you joining us. Teniola is a policy advisor is a policy fellow of Africa Policy Research at the Africa Policy Research Institute. She's a policy advisor with a focus on regional integration issues in Africa, including the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and wider trade, investment, and development policies on the continent. She has previously worked as a consultant with the Institute of Security Studies, Supply Chain. Teniola has also worked as a senior legislative aide with the Nigerian Senate and a consultant with the Office of the Vice President. She recently completed a fellowship at the European University Institute's School of Transnational Governance, and she runs AlloyNet Advisors, which is a public and private sector advisory firm. Teniola, you're welcome again to our webinar. We also have David Adetula. David Adetula is an editorial assistant at the African Liberty. He's a member of the African Liberty Writing Fellowship class of 2022-2023. He was awarded the Best Graduating Fellow of his set. He has written and worked with several writing fellows to publish articles about free trade, freedom of movement, and other freedom-centric issues. He's a public health researcher and a dentist in training. David, you are also welcome. We'll also have a third speaker is Doyinsola Olagunju. Doyinsola is a lawyer, freelance journalist. He makes regular commentary on Africa's socio-political issues and publishes The National Cake. He has been published on Foreign Policy, Business Day, Nigerian Tribune, and so many others. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome. So let's just get straight to it. And I would like to begin with this question to Teniola. Teni, could you, give a brief assessment of, the state of intra-African travel in your view as it stands?
Thank you very much. The question is the state of intra-Africa travel.
Yes.
Yes, I'd say, you can look at it from a few different lenses. So you can talk about the traffic of intra-Africa travel or the traffic of travel within between African countries. And we'll say that that is not very high, at least comparative to many other regions in the world. So we have more Africans traveling out of Africa for tourism, for health reasons, or for study than we have within Africa. So that's one lens to look at it. The other lens is the cost. The cost of traveling within Africa is currently quite high compared to even sometimes traveling out of Africa. I hope my connection is stable enough. But then, for example, it's cheaper for me to go from Senegal to Spain than it is for me to go from Senegal to Nigeria. So, and then someone was just telling me, someone from South Africa was telling me that when she was going from Cape Town to Cape Verde, she had to go through Dubai, and I think two other foreign countries to get to Cape Verde. So the cost and the connectivity is quite low because the demand is sort of low, the suppliers are also not many. So you have low demand, low supply, prices are high, and there's just not many options, especially when you're traveling extra regionally. So within West Africa, it's better. We're going from perhaps west to central or west to south, or west to north. Then you have some issues connecting. And then there is the ease of travel. So how easy is it to move from one African country to the other, whether it's by land, by air, or by water? Again, the current status differs whether you're talking about regional travel, so within maybe ECOWAS or within the EAC, or when you're talking about extra-regional travel. So for example, in East Africa, there's an East African visa, in quotes, although it only covers Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, where you can get that single visa, apply online, and you get it within a few days, and it allows you to enter any of the countries for, I think, up to 90 days. Some of those countries also have their own individual e-visas that you can apply online, and then you get it within a couple of days. But then you go to maybe South Africa, which also has an online system that's doesn't work very well, and it's quite sometimes can be quite challenging to get a South African visa in time. You have some North African countries that also have difficult visa requirements. So the ease of entry is quite tricky. So that's why a lot of people just opt to go overseas instead of traveling within Africa, because you have the cost, first of all, you have the connectivity issues, then you have sometimes the visa requirement. But then now that I've spoken a bit about the negative side, I'd say that on the positive side, more African countries are opening up to each other. So the latest that we heard was Ghana and South Africa, removing visa requirements or waiving visa requirements between themselves. So yeah, the current status of intra-Africa travel is not as we'd like, but then slowly things seem to be getting better.
Thank you so much, Penny, for that overview. So, I mean, I have quite an experience, or say I've been to 4 African countries, and my first time out of Nigeria was me traveling by road to Ghana. I can't remember if it was bad. I can't say it was good or bad, but my experience traveling to South Africa this year, it's a different story. I would say it's bad, the visa processing, but my experience being in Kenya and Rwanda, seamless, So I would say that in my view, maybe we can say that intra-African travel is improving, according to the Visa Openness Index. We get more African countries now adopting the e-visa thing, but it's not yet a general thing. Anyway, let me allow the other speakers. David, Doi would like to see you on video. My question to you, David, now is, the African Union has Agenda 2063, which is we're 10 years in already. And one of the treaties, or one of the strategies, the ideas that the AU have to, progress regional integration in Africa is the Free Movement of Persons Protocol. David, can you please tell us what's the significance of the AU Freedom of Persons Protocol, for Africa, especially as in regards to free trade?
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Larry Levison. Thank you very much for bringing me on this panel. And then also Teniola and Deinsola, good to be doing this with you. Yeah, to your question, of course, the 2063 agenda that the African Union has set as the free movement in, as part of what we hope to achieve. And of course, let me say that this isn't just even peculiar to just Africa. Now, bringing it home, when we talk about the free movement of persons or people's protocol, of course, I think I should perhaps give a bit of background. So, in 1991, a lot of states agreed, or said there was the establishment of that particular treaty, and it didn't get to be adopted until after about some years afterwards, I think 1994. And then things stalled for a lot of time, not until very much, more recently, 2018, when some countries, a few countries actually have deposited their, instrument of ratification. I think as at the last time I checked, we've only had about 4 countries or thereabouts. I'm aware Rwanda has deposited its instrument of ratification. I'm aware Mali, and I know about Sao Tome and Principe. So, I mean, the question would be, where are the big wigs? I mean, where are the bigger countries? I mean, when I talk about bigger countries, I mean population, terms of economic power and all of that. So that is the current situation of things. And of course, you've asked about the significance. We know that once we open up ourselves as countries, a lot of things will get better. And I like to say this a lot of time, that by about 2050, there are a lot of projections that are saying, oh, look, Africa is going to have the population in this continent will be a lot. And countries like Nigeria, for instance, who is a country that is currently, say, occupying about the 6th or 7th position in the population ladder, would move to the 3rd position. That's much more than the United States in terms of population. I'm just saying that the human potentials that that lie in Africa is a whole lot in the near future. And for us to make the best out of all these things, such that we don't just transport these resources, human resources and all of these things, to other continents, we can harness resources within the continent for progress. I mean, when we're able to move freely, economic development would come. In fact, in terms of value addition, it is easier for you to say you're mining something in Nigeria, for instance. You take it to, if South Africa has that capacity to transform into something of more value. Then when South Africa is perhaps has done its bit, it's taken to, say, Mozambique, or it comes to Niger, and that is one of the benefits we tend to achieve if we're able to move freely within ourselves as a country. I think I'll just pause at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for for that interesting one. It reminds me of a quote, a popular quote by Frederick Bastiat, the economist, who said that if goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. And we all know that if goods cannot cross borders by themselves, it is important that we let people move across the continent if we are going to see a successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Teniola, I want to come to you now. David mentioned that only 4 people, which is the fact, only 4 countries have ratified the FMP so far. And when you look on the other, we've had about 46 countries ratified it. What are the major challenges? What is hindering countries, for ratifying the free movement of persons protocol? Daniela, this is for you.
Thank you. Yes, only 4 countries have ratified, and I think altogether 33 of them or so have signed. And then for the AFCFTA, you have 54 countries that have signed it, and then 47, I think, that have ratified it. And so the difference is clear between the 2 agreements. The AFCFTA provides for the free movement of goods and services within Africa, and the FMP provides for the free movement of persons within Africa. I mean, even on the surface, when you look at it, for the AFCFTA, a lot of countries feel like they can see what is in it for them. So, and this is partly because of the way that they perceive it. The AFCFTA is about the free movement of goods, but many countries are seeing it as an opportunity to send goods out. So they see it as primarily an opportunity to export to Africa. And you can see this in the language that they use. So when Nigeria talks about the AFCFTA, they say, oh, we can export to Africa. When South Africa talks about the AFCFTA, they say we can export to Africa. But the AFCFTA is about both importing and exporting. If everyone is sending out goods, then who is receiving them? So because there was that tendency to see the AFCFTA as an opportunity, because at the end of the day, what do all countries want? You want to export. And why do you want to export? Because you're putting money in the pockets of your citizens. So your citizens are producing things, and if they're able to export, and that's money coming into their pockets, and also money coming into the government's pockets through taxes and different things like that. But for the FMP, they perceive it now, because you see, for the AFCFTA, there's a tendency to look at it as things going out, so goods going out and money coming in. For the FMP, they're thinking about it more as people coming in, and not, first of all, people going out. So they're not thinking about, oh, I'd like my citizens to be able to travel within Africa and see opportunities there. They're thinking about it from the other direction, that, oh, I do not want to open my gates to Africans to just come in willy-nilly. So that's the difference in perception with the two agreements. And there's some countries that have documented their resistance. So for South Africa, and typically when you have South Africa take a position, the Southern African region follows suit. So they have like a white paper that they documented on why they feel like they cannot sign onto the FMP at the moment. And it's concerns around security and just the different capacities of documentation in African countries. So the idea that some countries do not have robust databases of their citizens. So if something happens, they're not really able to assign responsibility and things like that. You also hear some funny things, you know. I mean, South Africa is a peculiar case because there's also issues of xenophobia and just anti-African migration. Same with North Africa. So there's issues of anti-Africa in quotes migration. They are more open to non-African migrants. But even beyond South Africa, beyond North Africa, generally for African countries, the fact is that a lot of us are still struggling. So a lot of us not even have enough resources to take care of our own people. And some governments are looking at this more like, I can't even take care of my people yet. So why would I say I'm opening up the doors to others? How do I now stop that if it starts to happen? But that's not what the FMP is providing for, because I always remind people again that the FMP is not saying that anyone can just walk into your country at any time. You know, even within ECOWAS, that we already have a free movement arrangement, you can't just walk into Ghana, you know. I can't just walk into Ghana and ask them to let me in. I need to show my travel document. I need to, there's going to be some screening. So there's still that, there's still that, you know, permission for countries to exercise their sovereignty even within the FMP. And I think the other reason why they are resistant to it is because they think that it will happen all at once, which is not the case. So first of all, the FMP is to be implemented in 3 phases. The first phase just says abolition of visas. And even for the abolition of visas, within ECOWAS, we know that it doesn't mean that you can just go and stay. It means, what it means is that you don't have to get a visa before you get there. And when you get there, you're stamped 90 days to stay. And then you have to leave within 90 days or find a way to extend your visa through legal means. If you leave after 90 days, you're going to be fined at the border, whether it's at the airport or at the land border. So some countries think that, oh, the moment they sign and ratify, you know, they've thrown the gates open, and that is not the case. That is not what the FMP provides for. The FMP is trying to ease travel for students, for tourists, also for business people and for job seekers. So yeah, there is that perception that it's going to be a loss rather than an opportunity for their citizens to also travel, you know, establish in Africa, and then even bring some more value back to their own countries.
A follow-up question on that, Henny. Are these concerns legitimate? You know, because if we look at it, if we are being honest, you know, there's the issue of not effective border management, there is security risk and all of that. So are these concerns, you know, legitimate?
The concerns are not illegitimate. But I think we have to be, I mean, the countries have to be a little bit more realistic. So I was having a discussion with someone not too long ago, and they were arguing with me that, you know, free movement is going to ease the movement of extremists, you know, across borders. And then I asked them that today, how do extremists move across borders in Africa, even in West Africa? So how many Boko Haram people are going to collect passports and then, you know, traveling to Ghana or to wherever? Because typically extremists move within regions. So if it's Boko Haram, they're moving between Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, Chad, because those are land borders. Most of the time, this movement of whether it's arms or violent extremists or insurgents, it's through ungoverned borders. So they don't even usually typically follow formal border routes. They're going through ungoverned spaces because we still have lots of, border areas in our countries that are not manned by border officials or that are not protected in any way. So it's good to be a little bit like there's a nuanced perspective to this, right? And again, it's the FMP is not providing for the movement of people willy-nilly. You're still going to need your travel documentation. You're still going to be able to be traced back to your country. Your countries can still take responsibility for whatever happens, right? If you need to be repatriated, you're not stateless. It's not for the movement of stateless people. If I'm coming from Nigeria, they can take me back to Nigeria if anything happens or if there is an issue. So I agree that yes, of course, with anything you have to be cautious, you have to make provisions. But some of the requirements that some countries are putting forward, like I think for the Southern African group, they're saying that first of all, African countries need to be at similar development levels, which may not be very realistic. At the end of the day, we would always have different capacities. The idea is that we should just be able to meet some minimum requirements when it comes to documenting our citizens and being able to receive them back in the event of any issues happening. Then there's also the realistic fact that when it comes to jobs and infrastructure, we are struggling even for what we have already. So for the people in Nigeria, we're already struggling to provide jobs for them. But then it's not just, you see, for the AFCFTA, people see it as an opportunity, but for the FMP, they see it as a cost. For the FMP, we also have to see it in the way that, okay, if we sign this, the Nigerians that are looking for jobs can also go somewhere else and find jobs, and then remit back to Nigeria, instead of only looking at it as, oh, people are going to come to Nigeria and they're going to finish all of the jobs that we have. Because again, many times when migrants come into countries, a lot of them establish businesses and then they even create employment. So it's a two-sided coin. And while you make provisions you put in measures to avoid the more extreme disadvantages, there are lots of advantages that are not being regarded at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'll come back to you then. Mr. Dunyo, are you able to join us now? Okay. Welcome, Dunyo. So the question to you, I'm sure you've been following the conversation. Do you think in all of this, because we've been seeing bilateral arrangements, between countries, Ghana and South Africa, I think is it Botswana and Namibia, is this going to, are these bilateral, travel arrangements, no visa arrangement between African countries, is it going to in any way affect the implementation of the FMP? So there's been some bilateral travel, no visa, travel arrangements within some African countries. There is Ghana and South Africa. There is, I think, Botswana and Namibia. We're seeing this. It's becoming, a trend, so to speak. Do you think this will affect the implementation of the FMP in any way?
All right, thank you very much, Larry, for that question. So I think I'll perhaps pick it up from where Teniola stopped. So Teniola actually mentioned South Africa, which I think is one particular country that is, I don't want to use the word notorious. I didn't use that word in terms of, restriction when it comes to immigration. And then you realize that South Africa gives some concerns. They put some concerns forward that are actually very laughable, really. And then this particular country is one country that actually is at the vanguard of doing some sort of bilateral agreement with a lot of countries. And then you come to ask that why can't we just have this, even at the regional level, even within the SADC, that's the South African Development Commission, I mean the continent community rather, you realize that South Africa, claims to be a vanguard of doing things the right way, in quotes, has not been able to achieve or mobilize the countries in their own region to achieve, regional cooperation when it comes to free movement of persons. When you look at ECOWAS and EAC, the Eastern African, community, it's a lot better with them in terms of cooperation. Again, to answer your question directly, I think that these bilateral agreements is not bad, even at the regional level. It is not bad, but the question is, are we not creating parallelism? I mean, is this not going to be creating parallel systems in place? And maybe we can agree to say, oh, for a start, instead of having something that continues to stall for like forever, like, I mean, just 4 countries out of about 55 countries, that's very poor in terms of performance. I mean, so let's say if we can, what I'll just say in this regard is that if we can encourage as much as possible at the regional level, even the bilateral, let's see how it works. Then if the African Union can bring this, at the regional level, bring all these regions to the table and say, oh, look, what exactly have you been able to untangle when it comes to free movement of persons? What are the concerns that have been raised such that these concerns continue to remain with FMP, but at the regional level, you've been able to address them? Then let's bring these concerns together and see how we can fix this problem such that we can move forward. Again, it is not just okay for us to remain at the regional level. We are not just going to make enough progress as we should if we remain at that regional level, or even bilateral level. Bilateral is just more or less like since South Africa, just like Teniola said, more recently, Ghana and South Africa had some agreement. So it's never going to, achieve what we hope to achieve.
Thank you, David. Tenny, do you have anything to say on the same question?
So, I mean, the bilateral arrangements, they are a symptom of something, which is that even though some African countries do want some movements, they feel like the FMP is, maybe the design of the FMP is not adequate for that objective. So, I mean, because the FMP is not just about the FMP, it's about easing intra-Africa travel. So if some countries are beginning to do that, even some abolishing visa requirements, I think some countries that have abolished visa requirements in general are not even, may not even have ratified the FMP. So they want the thing, but then for some reason they're doing it outside of this African Union process. And I think it's the responsibility of those that are in charge of the process to go and find out, why this is the case. So if a country has signed something or has said, we're opening up to all Africans, one example is Kenya, which claims that, I mean, their Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think, was saying some months ago that, oh, they're going to abolish visa requirements to Kenya. They haven't done that yet. It will be good, but Kenya has not ratified the FMP, so it will be good to know what they feel is lacking in the FMP so that there's a more coherent approach towards this easing of intra-Africa travel. And the issue with the bilateral arrangements, again, is that it's going to be very selective, of course. So it's the same way, for example, I think, is it Botswana? I think, is it Botswana, but the Tswana from Botswana, that they don't require visas to go to the UK. I can't remember, but then I think there are a few African countries that don't require visas to go to the UK, but it's very ad hoc, right? So very selective. It's like the elite few or the like a close group of people or close group of countries that people prefer, and then it can be revoked at any time, which is the other issue. So remember when, I can't remember if it was the UK that released a list of countries that they were stopping visa-free access or something access. So it's better when it goes through the protocol, because then there's some safeguards for people just changing their minds willy-nilly. But then, so on one hand, yes, it's good that they're opening up and then having all of these arrangements, especially reciprocal arrangements, because when South Africa opened up to Kenya, this was a very delayed response to the fact that South Africans could already enter Kenya visa-free. So it was just now them reciprocating. So on one hand, yes, it's good because it meets the same objective, but on the other hand, there's some gaps there. The FMP is more coherent, more structured, and it'll be good if things are done in that direction rather than the more ad hoc selective process. Yeah.
Thank you. So I just want to use the moment to speak to the audience. Please, if you have questions, put it in the chat box. Let's for any of the speakers, please let's address whatever concerns. And also just to mention, as I said earlier, this is the 6th and also the last episode of our Trade and Development webinar series, supported by the IATP, which we appreciate their support. So over the last 6 months, this is the 6th month, Free Trade Fellows, 5 of them, have been publishing on top publications on trade issues in Nigeria and Africa. We've had over 25 publications so far. So thanks to our to our supporter, the IATP. Now I know we've talked about, the FMP, the AU, FMP as an agenda, as part of the agenda of the African Union, and how it's, it's connected to free trade. Now let's discuss about the way forward. We know now that there is this treaty, and we know also understand. I like how Tenny, I like how you put it, that the countries, African nations, sees the AFTA as an opportunity, or the FMP as a cost. You made it really simple to understand. So what do we now need to do? As advocates of free trade and development on the continent, what do we need to do to ensure speedy ratification of the FMP? David, Mr. Doyin, are you here now? Are you able to join us now? I mean, to speak. I know he's on here, but he did put in the chat that he's having audio issues. So, David, you as the assistant editor of African Liberty, an African publication, what do we need to do? As advocates, what do we need to do to ensure that our countries and more countries, ratify and deposit their instrument of ratification for the FNP, so that Africans can now travel freely in Africa?
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Larry. So again, I'll just go back to what I said initially. I mean, I think when we understand and identify the problems, we are able to prefer solutions to achieve what we hope to achieve with FMP. Now, we already talked about some of the concerns, and then, for instance, we've heard South Africa say things like, "Oh, that some countries are not having some sort of robust system, right? That would, ensure that there's an effective." Hello, am I audible, please?
Yes, you are.
Hello, can anyone hear me, please?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. So, I mean, in terms of capacity wise, there's a difference amongst African countries. Then why are we not coming together, say at the level of the AU, to address these concerns? The truth is, in terms of economic powers, we are at various levels. I mean, we are at different levels. The way Nigeria would address its border migration issue would definitely be different from the way Nigeria would do that, because of Nigeria has more, they have better resources to handle all of these things. I remember one of our fellows wrote something about digitalization of that buoyancy, financial capacity to achieve this. Then why can't we just come together as a country and see, oh look, what countries cannot or will not be able to achieve this, so they can be assisted such that these systems will be in place? Because at the end of the day, even if we are saying, oh, look, Nigeria is going to open its own border, let's say, for instance, which bigger countries, even though those bigger countries are the ones giving some of the problems and the concerns, but let's assume they're able to fulfill some of these criteria that are needed. Some smaller countries in quotes, may not be able to achieve all these things. So I think, for the sake of equity and for the speedy ratification of this protocol, then these smaller countries need to be assisted. And again, I already mentioned in terms of digitalizing border systems, because a country like Nigeria, for instance, one of the major things Nigeria has been saying is that in terms of security, even Nigeria that claims to be concerned about the security system is not doing enough in terms of putting structures in place such that their security concerns are checked. Now, I mean, this is taking me to the second point I'm mentioning, which is this political will to do something. I mean, if we are saying that we are fearing the infiltration of terrorists, and of course, we've been saying even within the regional level that some people are coming in and they are, causing problems in the country, then what exactly is this country doing to ensure that there's a proper identification system in place? Nigeria collects a lot of data data from its citizens, but of course, these data are not synchronized, such that you cannot even vouch to say that Nigeria has an established or a proper, a robust identification system. So I think this is one place we need to start from, especially as a country. I mean, Nigeria, for instance, we can't continue to give that excuse of security. Of course, that concern is genuine, but what are we doing to address this? I believe that when we document migrants properly, and of course, they are, a database system, and we can easily share intelligence with neighboring countries. We can easily share information with neighboring countries, such that when somebody is coming in, and perhaps, let's say, for instance, somebody is coming in from Uganda, and Uganda already has that person documented. It is just Uganda sharing information with Nigeria to say, oh, look, this person coming, if you have suspicion, you can just, try to make your inquiries, and this person coming in is not a threat to the country. And of course, this concern is addressed. So again, like I said, a robust identification system, political will, and we having to assist countries that may not be able to meet some of these requirements. Thank you.
That sounds interesting, but I have a follow-up. You did mention the need to, if we are going to have a robust identification system, that would require some investment. And for Nigeria that I know, how the government prioritizes based on lack of funds, to even meet the national budget and all that. But on the issue of political will, how do we ensure that our political leaders prioritize this? Because if it is seen as a cost, like Tennis said, if this is not seen as an opportunity to export, to generate revenue, but instead seen as something like a security threat and all of that. So how do we, push for, make sure that there is a political will for this? What do we need to do?
Thank you very much for that. So again, I think Tenny mentioned that the implementation of this particular protocol is in stages. I think she talked about one being able to move visa free. I think there's also a component of this protocol that says that allows for residents, right? I think that's the second stage, and the third stage talks about establishment. So I think we need to move beyond saying, oh, that the perception of countries need to change. That's just about some people coming into the countries, to their countries and doing, more or less like it's going to be cost them in terms of maintaining the population base. We also need to see from the angle that when people come in to reside, ultimately they want to make a living, right? They want to perhaps establish businesses. Not until we're able to facilitate their easy movement, the later stage will never come to fruition. So I think Nigeria needs to look at it from that. And for a country like Nigeria, whose economy is driven largely by small, medium, and small and medium skilled enterprises. If I'm putting forward here, I'm bringing some businesses here, I'm establishing here, it is an advantage to us as a country. Again, like I said, the political leaders really need to shift their mindset. They need to leave that that perception behind and say, of course, when we have more foreigners come around, then these guys are coming to also, establish here. And of course, this will also contribute to our economy, on the long run. And even when we talk about ACTA, for instance, of course, when we're talking about transfer of goods and everything, there's also a human component to all of this. We can't just send goods alone abroad and say things will just move freely. Human component also has to be looked into, and that has to also be facilitated alongside after. So in essence, I'm saying that really FMP also is more or less like an add-on to what has been in existence. And of course, I already mentioned earlier that there's also respect for rights of individuals. It's something we also need to look from that perspective. We cannot just keep saying that because of this concern, everyone is guaranteed the right to live anywhere really, as long as they are not threats, they don't constitute nuisance in those countries. So again, there are multi-level points I think we can look at this from and say, oh, look, we need to just do something. Again, like I said, we need to look at the investment opportunity, the foreign investment that could come on the long run when we're able to achieve FMP. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that one. Thank you so much. Penny, I'm coming to you now. As someone who you've engaged stakeholders, the National Action Committee on FTA and many others, do you think that the FMP is even on the agenda at all for Nigerian stakeholders now?
That's a tricky question to answer. I mean, when you talk about Nigeria, there are many different Nigerias in quotes. So when you talk about the Nigerian government, there are many different parts of the Nigerian government, and they don't necessarily all have the same vision or objectives. So you can talk to one person in a particular section of the government, whether it's a presidency, maybe you talk to somebody at the ministry, you may hear two different things. You may talk to the National Assembly, you may hear another thing. So the thing with Nigeria, similar to other countries, is that the most urgent thing for us is diversifying our exports away from oil. So a lot of the things that we're doing is geared towards that. So the presidency launched the National Talent Export Program not too long ago, which is still geared at diversifying exports away from oil. They're trying to invest in some sectors. So a lot of attention is being put on that now. But then if you try to read in between the lines, even for the National Talent Export Program and the things that the Ministry of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy that they're running alongside the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment in terms of trying to create jobs for 5 million Nigerians, you can actually see a mobility dimension to this. So a mobility dimension that will mean that if Nigeria ratifies, the FMP signs and ratifies, and then if the FMP eventually is being implemented, that more Nigerians will be able to travel, export their skills, because even when it comes to trade in services, so services exports, one of the modes of delivery is when the person that is delivering the service actually goes to the other country. So that's the movement of natural persons. So for example, a Nigerian architect going to Kenya to help design a house and maybe monitor the building of the house as the architect or the chief architect. So the FMP is in our favor. So I guess the simple answer I'd say to that is that, of course, you don't hear the language of the FMP from the Nigerian government at the moment. I mean, the new Ministry of Foreign Affairs is just settling in. The new Ministry of Interior, they're all just settling in. So it's still tricky to know exactly what their focus is going to be. I know that I read from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think from yesterday or 2 days ago, that they're going to treat visa seekers same as they treat Nigerians. So it's not going to be on the basis of reciprocity. So those that have simple visa requirements or no visa requirements for Nigerians, Nigeria is going to adopt the same. So that's what what I heard from them. But then that is globally. Now, in terms of Africa, there's a question about to what extent they would want to abolish visa requirements. Although some of them will tell you that Nigeria is already visa on arrival, but some people complain about how well that works, and also how well it works over land borders. So maybe the way I'll summarize my response to that is that even though you may not hear the language of the FMP from the Nigerian government, and even though, which is even the trickier part of it, that within Africa, some of the resistance to the FMP from some countries is actually targeted at Nigerians. Now, because this is a Nigerian meeting, I'll even disclose that I was listening to it was even a public event. I was listening to a public event, I think on free travel or something, and then a South African said, "Oh, of course the Nigerian government wants free travel because they're looking for where to dump Nigerians. So that was a very, weird statement. So there's this idea that Nigerians are already very mobile. So there's a lot of mobility from Nigeria. And, there's some funny perceptions about what Nigerians do in other countries. So we're even in a tricky position there where there is some resistance to very specifically Nigerian migration to some African countries. But then the third aspect of the response is that there are objectives that the government has that will be facilitated by the FMP, even though they may not overtly recognize that yet. But one of the pillars, or one of the projects, the main projects that this administration is trying to run now is the National Talent Export Program, and that will be facilitated by the FMP. So reading in between the lines, we can see that some of their visions or part of their vision aligns with the FMP, but perhaps more people need to do the work of pointing it out to them. And just to close that off, I spoke to someone from one of the ministries that is supposed to be in charge of this, and I was asking them about this, and they were not even sure whether Nigeria had even signed or ratified. So it's probably not top of the mind, but again, it depends on who you're talking to. Yeah.
Interesting, and thanks for disclosing that. So we are in a position where we haven't ratified for sure, signed, I'm not sure, but we are implementing programs that looks like we are tilting towards that far. Tricky, as you said. So what do we do, to increase the awareness? How public office holders or political leaders also listen to what's making the waves in the public opinion. So how do we raise public awareness for this, for the FMP, so that it becomes top of mind, at least for the decision makers?
Yes, it's a very important one, because public awareness is on two levels. There's the public awareness for the decision makers, and then for the general public. And both are very important, because sometimes it's when the general public really wants something that you can push the decision makers to take the particular action. And really, when it comes to awareness, you just have to start shouting it out. One of the key things that we need to do, because there have been some dialogues on the FMP, but it's too technical. So like some of the things that we are doing on our end is to make it less technical, because when you say the FMP, a lot of people don't even know what that is. When you say the protocol for the free movement of persons, rights of residence, and rights of establishment, you've lost many people. But then when you talk about easing intra-Africa travel, then people understand what you're talking about. So you see how they say Apple will not say, oh, the camera is 200 megapixels or whatever, but they'll say that you can take a picture of your eyeballs, So it's about what it's trying to achieve. So do you want to go study, there's some excellent schools in South Africa, in Kenya, in Senegal. Would you like it to be easier for you to go study there? Some beautiful, in East Africa, you have like lovely coastal, areas, right? Would you like to be able to go there? For Nigerian digital nomads, for example, instead of trying to be a digital nomad in Portugal or in Spain, where your rent is going to be very high, you can move somewhere to Tanzania, and your costs are still going to be low, but then you have a different space, a different environment, you're by the sea. So marketing the benefits, and that is how people can connect to it. And then for the decision makers, it's also in some ways marketing the benefits, but from a different dimension. All countries are interested in is more money coming in, more revenue coming in. So if we point out that, for example, when it comes to remittances, I remember I saw these numbers somewhere. I can't remember the details now. But then interestingly, I can't remember which country, the highest remittances were coming actually from another African country. So it's meant that a lot of, because when we think remittances, we're thinking about people from the US, from the UK, which is true. But then for that country, the highest remittances were coming from another African country. So a lot of their own people were in that country working there and then sending money back, because we do move a lot intra-regionally. So when we start bringing out some of those numbers that, your people are in Africa, your people are making money in Africa, your people can also go to start businesses there, and then it expands your reach, so focusing more on the policy relevance, the policy benefits, the revenue benefits, the exports benefits for the governments, then they can also buy in. For the people, it's about, what is in it for them, free travel. For the government, it's about what is in it for them, it's about more money, in what ways can it translate to more money or just a better life for their people? Yeah.
That's interesting, and I want to say a big thank you for that brilliant response, I must say, because we actually need to, raise awareness. And as you said, it is what we should do, to magnify the benefits, let the people know, what's in it for the people and what's also in it for the country, with data. Thank you so much. So now I want to, this is to the audience. Do we have any question? We're coming to the end of it. If you have a question, you can put on your camera, ask the speakers as we are, coming to the end of this webinar. Anyone, any question? Okay, we're not getting, I can't see any hand raised or anyone wanting to ask questions. So I will just let the speakers give us a final,
Joshua's hand is raised.
final. Oh, okay.
Sorry
Thank you for letting me see. Joshua.
Thank you so much for that.
Joshua, please go ahead with your question.
Yes. No, once I just want to say thank you so much. I'm not Nigerian. I'm Ugandan, South African, currently in South Africa. And I go back to the lady's statement that, there are many challenges around the FMP and making people understand how important it is for our intra-Africa trade and just getting to know one another better. But I've heard Dangote in the past complain about his own challenges with traveling on the continent. I would like the panelists to just give a brief input on what they think about an AU passport as opposed to individual country passports. And in particular, in light of the fact that I look at the South African context, for a population of 60 odd million, about 5 million are actually undocumented. That's South African and foreign national. But overwhelmingly, I think 4.5 million are actually undocumented who are South African born. But yeah, what are their perceptions of an AU passport? Is it feasible? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Interesting question. Any of the speakers is open to any of you, please. David, Danny?
Well, okay, let me just give my own contribution. So I think EU passport is something that looks great on paper, honestly. And of course, if we realize it, it's going to be a whole lot. But again, if these concerns are not resolved, I mean, the concerns that currently plague the FMP, I mean, there's no point floating something that won't kill. I don't know if you get the point I'm trying to make. So if countries like South Africa is still saying that a country just within its community, SADC, cannot, move freely, or they don't have sort of, they can't come together to ensure things scale, then what's the point of having to say that somebody from Algeria, for instance, should should be able to move freely? It won't, these things should be in stages. That's the point I'm trying to make. And of course, FMP is a litmus test for all of these things. If we are able to achieve the free movement of persons at the level of FMP, I believe it's almost, in fact, it is synonymous to saying that within the EU states, everyone can move visa free. Thank you.
Interesting. Danny, do you want to say anything to that?
Maybe very quickly. So in trade, there's something that you have, I can't remember the full acronym now, but then it's something export operator. So it's so for example, like Dangote is already a well-regarded exporter. And the idea is that Dangote should not be made to follow every single procedure requirement as an unknown exporter. So it's like a preferred access that can be given to Dangote. So they speed up his own processes because he's already verified. And there is some talk about having that, on the level of also movement of people. So where some people, because even for the AU passport, the initial discussion is not even about it being available to everyone, but maybe to some people, so people like Dangote in quotes. And the challenge that we have with things like that is that, for example, the African Union's power is not very strong. All right. So some people think about the African Union and they want to compare it to the European Union, but the African Union does not have as much executive powers as the European Union. At the end of the day, the African Union can only do things. The power of the African Union is limited to the power that the heads of states allocate to it. And that power can be revoked very easily. So if you have an African Union passport that's, cuts across all countries, the question is, who will be administrating it? How is it going to be administered? How is it going to be controlled? How is it going to be managed? And where does that capacity lie? So you have the Central Bank for French-speaking West Africa as one example. The headquarters, I think, is in Senegal. So there is that capacity in there too, and then they try to resource it from across the region. So that's what happens there. But if you're talking about a passport for the entire the continent of Africa, then I don't think we are at that level yet to be able to monitor, administer it, or capacitate it as we ought to. In ECOWAS, we have the ECOWAS, like on my Nigerian passport, it says ECOWAS, but it's still a Nigerian passport. So that is, a different probably dimension to it in terms of passports that are issued nationally, and then they have an African Union stamp. But I think I'll align with David here that, we have to take things one step at a time. We're definitely not there yet at all, because sometimes you want to ask the question of what is the objective and what is the easiest way to achieve that objective, instead of going for the more complicated way that may be more costly. So if there's an easier way to achieve it, if already it's recognized that if you're coming with an African passport, you have visa-free access, then is there a need to have an African Union passport in that case, where there'll be extra implications in terms of cost, in terms of resources needed to run it? Yeah.
Thank you for that. Our time is up. So I just want you both to, say a line on, the topic that we've been discussing, freedom movement or free movement of people, and, in the connection with intra-African trade. Just, one sentence, and let's bring it to an end. So Tenny, to you.
Thank you. So I think what I'll just say is that if you feel interested in this topic, please read more about it, and then please share the information with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues. Very few people know about this. Very few people know that there's a plan to make it easier for people to travel within Africa. So spread the word. First of all, educate yourself, inform yourself, and then spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
All right, so I'll just say that really, for us as a continent, there's no way we can achieve economic sustainability. We cannot achieve independence, true economic independence, if we don't trade amongst ourselves, if we don't, do things amongst ourselves. And of course, doing things amongst ourselves is flattered on the fact that we can move within our own borders freely. So something everyone should be concerned about, and let's keep shouting about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, David. And thank you everyone for joining. This has been an interesting conversation, and we can all agree that free movement of Africans is a catalyst for intra-African trade and African integration. Thank you all so much for joining. We appreciate you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.